Hello. You're listening to the Career Changemaker podcast. Having the courage to leave a career that you have worked hard to build and try something else can be tough. So in each episode, we dive into key career change strategies so that you have a clear understanding of what is required to transition into a new role or a new industry without feeling like you have to start at the bottom or have to take a massive pay cut, because #ain't nobody got time for that. If you are ready for frank and honest discussions about how to become a career change maker, keep listening. I'm your host, lawyer turned career strategist and executive coach, Janine Esbrand. Hello, and welcome to the show. You know, whenever I come across a resource or a person or some information that I think is going to be really helpful for you in terms of your career development and advancement, I want to share it. And so today on the podcast, I'm going to be sharing with you a conversation that I had with an amazing human being called Mac Prichard. He is the founder of Mac's List, and he is phenomenal and a fountain of knowledge when it comes to job searching and career progression. Hi, Mac. I am so excited to have you on the show today. Before we dive in, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Janine. My name is Mac Prichard. I'm in Portland, Oregon in the United States, and I run a regional job board. It's called maxlist.org. And I came to this work after a long career in communications, working for nonprofits, in politics and government, and along the way have made a number of career changes. And I know we're going to talk about that. But at Mac's List, our job board is focused on 2 states in the U.S. We provide lots of free content about how to look for work and how to hire smarter. And so we actually attract a national, even a global audience for the free content that we offer for job seekers in the form of articles, online courses. This is all free, and as well as a weekly career advice podcast that I host.
Yeah, I love it. I've been on your site. There's so much on there in terms of resources and advice for people. So I love that your focus is local, but you're helping people all around the world through your online platform and reach. That's so awesome. So can you talk to us a little bit about your journey to getting to this point? You mentioned that your career before was in communications, and now you're running this job board and this career-focused business. How did you, or why did you, or both, make that transition?
In some ways, I'm an accidental job board operator. If you would ask me when I graduated from college many decades ago, I would be doing this, I wouldn't have guessed it at all. But when I reflect back on my career, Janine, there's a constant that runs through all the different jobs I've had, which is wanting to make a difference about issues I care about or in the community where I live and work, or ideally both. So when I finished university, I had 3 things I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to get paid to write. I wanted to work on political campaigns. And I wanted to work on human rights advocacy in Latin America. And by my mid-20s, I'd had 3 different jobs that allowed me to do each of those things. And in the career that followed, I shifted my focus to state and local government and politics, first in Massachusetts, where I lived for almost a decade, and then in Oregon for the last 30 years, which has been my home. But again, while I've had a lot of different jobs, spokesperson for different nonprofits, for state agencies, working for elected officials, eventually running my own public relations company, there was that thread that ran through it, wanting to make a positive difference. And I think that's a common factor for all of us. We all want work that has meaning. It doesn't mean you have to do human rights work in Latin America to do it. But you got to figure out what matters to you and find work that allows you to act on that goal.
Oh, I love that. That intentionality of let me find something that matters. I think that's so important, but many people overlook that, in my opinion. So when I see people or clients that I work with and people that I speak to, often people feel like they should be doing something or they should be following a certain path, and not many people focus on, okay, what do I actually want to be doing? And let me focus there. Has that been your experience with people that you work with? Like, people typically don't focus on
the intention piece.
It has, and it has also been my personal experience, Janine. I want to be clear. Hindsight is often 2020. When I say, when I got out of university, these are the three things I wanted to do. I knew it. I don't think I could have told you that as succinctly as I did a moment ago.
Yes.
And in my 20s and 30s, I had 2 long periods of unemployment. In spite of having, good education and some really cool jobs, in my mid-20s, I got stuck. And I see now it was because I wasn't clear about what I wanted to do next, which is very common. And when it happens, and it took me a while to figure this out personally, you got to invest time in clarifying your goals. And if you don't do that, if you default to what I did, many people do, sending out lots and lots of job applications, you'll likely get interviews, but if you're not clear about what you want, the hiring manager can sense that.
Yeah.
And she or he is going to also be talking to people who are crystal clear about what they want. And that's tough to compete against.
Yeah.
So, I think in our careers, if we want to find work that matters, and I think we all do, one of the things you have to invest in is getting clear about goal setting. And another thing you have to get good at in the course of your career is developing job search skills, because we're all going to change jobs a number of times, even if we stay in the same field. But the odds are we're going to change careers several times as well. And the sooner in our careers that we get good at goal setting, job search, the more satisfying a career we're going to have, and we increase the likelihood our searches are going to be shorter and we're going to get the job we want.
Yeah. And I like to talk to people about kind of taking ownership of that whole process and recognizing that you can take the time. And the time piece, you mentioned that there was a long period of time where you were kind of in between roles. I think that's important for people to pay attention to, that it's not always a quick fix, like getting the clarity and understanding what the next step is. Sometimes it can take months, it can take years for you to actually be at the stage where you're like, yes, this is what I want to do. But it's time well spent if you are then able to move into something that you absolutely enjoy doing.
Agreed. And I want to clarify, I had 2 long periods of unemployment. So in the United States, when you file for an unemployment insurance benefit, you typically get 30 checks. And I cashed the last check once, and I came within 1 check of doing it a second time.
Wow.
And I think it took so long, Janine, for me, I'm speaking for my own experiences, because it does take time to get clear about your goals. But once I focused on that, it didn't take all that long. Maybe couple weeks, and then I had to go out and start doing informational interviews and networking with people who worked in the field I wanted to be in. And in the first period of unemployment, I think it took me about 2 months to complete that process. But I was out of work for more than 7 months. And in the second period of unemployment, I had those goal-setting skills, but I wasn't getting out into the community. I wasn't volunteering. I wasn't networking. I let my pride get the better of me. I thought I should get paid to do work. And you don't want to isolate yourself when you're looking for work, as you know, or changing careers. And that was the lesson I learned from my second period of unemployment. The good news here is you can do this work in a relatively short amount of time, a month or 2. And you don't have to wait for unemployment to do it. You can do it throughout your career.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about the networking piece? Because it's so, so important. But I think, one, people don't always know how to go about networking, and they don't learn that at college or university, and it's a skill that you have to invest in. And 2, often people are reluctant to do it because they worry about bothering people or taking up someone else's time. Those are the things that I hear often from clients that I work with. Can you speak to, the importance of networking and maybe like some of the approaches that you suggest for people to actually get out there when they're feeling a bit reluctant or concerned or fearful that they don't want to reach out to people?
That's very natural. And it's something I think we all experience at different points. I think it's important to step back and understand how hiring works. And as you know, our mission at Max List is to make hiring more human. And that is our mission statement, because the way hiring works is employers want to reduce risk, Janine. Nobody likes a hire that doesn't work out. It's not good for the candidate. It's not good for the employer.
Yeah.
And often it takes 3-6 months or more to figure out that it's not working. And then you got to start all over again. So how do employers reduce risk? They rely on referrals and relationships and connections. And I think everybody who's listening, if they've been involved in a hiring process, can reflect on a period where reviewing resumes, someone came down the hall or called them up by phone or sent them a text or an email and said, hey, you should talk to Mary. She sent in her resume for this position. And you've got a stack of 40, 50 resumes. You pull Mary's resume out. That doesn't mean Mary's going to get the job, but now because of a connection, a referral, someone is looking at that resume seriously, and the odds are she's going to get a phone screener.
Yeah.
And so she's got the opportunity to make a case for herself. Now, sometimes that happens through serendipity, but you can create these referrals. And the way you do it is through networking. And to network effectively, you've got to have a clear job search goal. You got to know the position you want. And you have to have a list of target companies or employers, probably 24 names in all is a good size. And then when you have narrowed your universe to, I want this position, these are the places where I think I want to go, then you can identify the people inside those organizations or connected to them, and you can have deliberate strategic conversations with them. You're not asking them for coffee. You're not asking to pick their brain. You're asking for a business meeting. And when you do that, you're in charge, Janine. And everybody listening to this show has run more than their share of business meetings, and they know you got to have an agenda and some identified outcomes before you bring the group to order. And it's the same with informational interviews. These are one-on-one conversations where you're talking to someone who is inside the organization, and there's a reason why you want to talk to them. Maybe they have made the career change you want to make, and you want to learn from their experience. Maybe they're familiar with the field you want to be in, and you want to learn from them who's growing, who's hiring, what matters to employers. Maybe they hire people like for the position you want, and you want to get feedback on your resume, or you want to understand what the market pays for the position you want, or maybe there are some objections you think an employer might have about your candidacy because you're switching careers, for example. And here's a chance to road test those objections by asking questions about how you might address them. So these are all good reasons why you'll reach out to somebody. And if you do that and you treat it like a business meeting, I think it becomes a lot more comfortable because you know what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have conversations with people, if you frame it correctly, people are often willing to help. I think there's an assumption that, someone's going to be too busy, or I don't want to bother people. But I've had clients in the past, or I've been in situations where I've had an informational interview and the person's on the phone for half an hour, 45 minutes, happy to chat. Because once people start talking about themselves and their journey, often they like it because they don't always get a chance to do that. And so it's of benefit for them too.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. One of the best ways to be considered a brilliant conversationalist is to ask people about themselves. And your curiosity has to be genuine. You can't pretend to this. But if you are interested in making a career change and you found somebody who's done what you want to do, and you sit down with her and you ask her about her story and the challenges she had to overcome and how she successfully made the case she did to the employer who hired her, you're going to get invaluable insights. And people, to your point, they do want to help. You just got to be specific in your ask. You got to make it easy for people to say yes.
Yeah. So good. So good. So you mentioned about, making the job search more human. How does that work from the other side? So if you're a candidate going into an organization, how do you think organizations can do a better job at attracting the right type of candidate? Because it kind of goes two ways, right?
It does. And many employers don't provide the best experience. And I think the best candidate experience, Janine, I think in employers have been able to get away with this because, at least in the United States, until before the pandemic, it was an employer's market. Now in the US, we have record low unemployment rates, and we are in the middle of a labor shortage. There have been some well-publicized layoffs in the tech industry, for example, but nationally, it is a job seekers market. And so employers, I think, got accustomed to being able to not paying attention to basic communication with candidates.
Yeah.
And they were able to get away with it because there were so many applications. Now they're not. And so they should never have done that anyway. But at a minimum, employers, in order to provide a human hiring experience, need to communicate directly with candidates when applications are received. They need to keep candidates informed of their hiring timetable and their process. They need to respond to calls and texts and emails from candidates in a timely fashion. And they should do this because it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also in their interest as an employer, because the candidate experience is a branding experience. People who have a less than ideal experience with an employer when applying for a job are going to tell all their friends and family about it. So why it is the right thing to do anyway, but why wouldn't you do it just from the point of view of protecting and promoting your employer brand?
Yeah.
So, and eventually, I think more and more employers are understanding this, but there's still room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important because the experience that you have in the hiring process, even if you're somebody who ends up getting the role, it really sets the tone for how you're going to start and how you're going to be invested with this company and how much you trust them. And so starting from way before you even get to the interview, people are assessing whether this is a company I want to work for. And I think also now that there's been a shift in terms of what's important to people. It's not just how much you get paid and the benefits, is also what does this company stand for, and do their values align with my values, and what are they doing in terms of sustainability. And there's so much more, and there's so much change. There's been a lot over the post-pandemic.
Agreed. And of course, the flexibility and hybrid and remote schedules have become not necessarily must-haves, but they're not going away. It was the rare employer before 2020 in the United States who let you work at home on Fridays. And now for people who are working in offices, it's the rare employer that requires you to come in 5 days a week. Certainly there are well-publicized examples, but a significant percentage of employers are now providing hybrid and remote schedules, most more hybrid than remote, in part because the world has changed and they can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
In large part because of the labor shortage, and there's no sign that that's going to change in the short term.
Yeah. And I think people are. It's like you said. I like that phrase when you think about it. You let the genie out of the bottle. It's like once you realize, wait, why were we working like this? Why were we doing 9 to 5 in the office? Why we don't need to do that. People are not necessarily willing to go back to that.
Yeah, there were, for many years, you would hear about these pilot experiments and what sometimes was called telework, or people working remotely for 1 or 2 days a week, and it never moved beyond the pilot phase, at least in the United States. But the pandemic brought a 3-year-long experimental period, and it showed that it works.
Yeah.
And the labor shortage here in the U.S. has made it, has given workers leverage that they didn't have before 2020.
Yeah.
And that makes it doubly difficult to move back from those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, earlier you said about the fact that it's a candidate's market now versus a employer's market. I think sometimes people hear that, but when you're in the midst of your job search and you're struggling to land an interview or even get a response, land the interview in the first place, and then if you're in the interview, actually get the offer, What are some of the things that you typically see people are missing when it comes to positioning themselves in this type of market? Because there is competition, but maybe
Mhm.
not as much as there was before. But you still have to be able to show up in the way that makes you look like a great candidate, right? So what would you say people should be focused on when it comes to actually standing out in this market?
The basics still matter, no matter what the unemployment rate is, whether it's low or high. And the basics are know what you want, have a clear job search goal, know where you want to go, and know what you offer. And you got to be able to tell a compelling story that shows why you want this job, how you can do it exceptionally, and why you want to be at that organization. If you find yourself in conversation with friends or colleagues saying, well, I could do this, or I'm open to that, that to me is a tell that you're not clear about your goal. You're not clear about your target employers. And believe me, I've been there myself personally. This is very common. But if you want to compete successfully, and you got to get crystal clear about these basic questions. What is the job I want? Where are the employers where I want to go? What do I offer that makes me different?
Yeah.
And you got to be able to tell a compelling story.
Yeah, because it allows you to make more of a targeted application, and your job search process can be way more targeted because when you're not sure, you end up applying for all of these different things and you're not really selling yourself for any of them because it's way too generic. And then you find people getting disheartened and just saying, there's no jobs, I can't find a job. And it's like, well, actually, you're not really trying to apply for a job. You're just trying to apply for any job. And so you're not attracting any. Is the
there's no doubt that with enough time and effort, you can learn how to do any job. But again, you're competing against people who want that job, who want to be working for that employer, and who are making the case why this is so. And that is tough to compete against. So it comes back to basics. And in many ways, Janine, our job search is like a research project. And I think the most effective job seekers answer those basic questions before they send out their first applications. Yes. And so they invest time in goal setting. They invest time in researching target employers. If they're struggling with these issues, they may spend time with a career coach like you to get clarity. Maybe they go to the career services office if they're a university or they're a grad. There are a lot of resources you can use to help you answer these questions. But once you have the answers, then you start out sending out the applications and you're going to make a much more compelling case. And again, I made this mistake myself earlier in my career. Sometimes people use the application process to do their research.
Yes.
And that is going to make your search much longer and harder because if you go into an interview and you're not sure you want that job or you want to be at that place, that uncertainty is going to show. And you're probably one of 3 to 5 candidates who've been invited in for a conversation. And believe me, 1 or 2 of those, probably 3, are absolutely crystal clear they want to be there. And again, that's tough to compete against.
Yeah.
So do the research before you send out the first application.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point. It's funny that lots of people tend to just jump straight to, maybe it's just how we've learned about applying for jobs, but often if you feel like you need to move, people jump straight to, okay, I need to update my resume or I need to update my LinkedIn. And I say to people, but what are you updating it with though? Because you don't yet know what you want. So what are we putting on there? And it just amazes me how many people are like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't know it's like, yes, let's just slow down. We'll get there. Let's just start with the piece around what is it that you want? And it's a hard question to answer. It isn't an easy question, but to your point, it makes sense to do that first before you start the whole application process.
In my podcast, I talked to someone who moved to Portland, Oregon from Washington, D.C. She worked for a member of the U.S. Congress. She was what we call a trailing spouse. Her partner found a job here, so she came with him. And she was deputy communications director to a U.S. Senator, Chuck Schumer, actually, the majority leader. And the reason I tell the story is she didn't know anybody in Oregon. And she got here and she spent January through June going out and talking to people. She knew she wanted to work, given her background in politics and public policy and public affairs. So she had conversations with employers and people working in that field in the state of Oregon. And it was, she thought she might want to work at a utility, maybe a government agency, perhaps a leading nonprofit, maybe a public affairs firm. So she made a short list of organizations that offered the kinds of opportunities that she was interested in. She reached out to people and got introductions through her alumni database, but through other contacts that she'd made through the Oregon congressional delegation. And she sat down not to have coffee with people or to pick their brain, but to ask focused strategic questions about who the leading players were, what kind of jobs were available, what did they pay, what did people typically do, where did these positions lead. And in the course of about 6 months, she had 90 of these conversations.
Wow.
And she talked about this in our interview. And in the end, I think she applied for 3 jobs and she got offers for all 3. And people would say about that, what, 90 coffee meetings? That's crazy. But I meet people all the time who send out 90 applications in the course of 6 months. And they might get responses half the time. They might get, 5 to 10 interviews, and eventually they might get an offer. But here's what this person did that was so invaluable was she created a network. And she was in touch with these people long after she accepted the job she got. And that is invaluable to you in your career. She also went into those applications with an insider's understanding of what the market paid, what mattered to employers, what objections employers might have about someone like her coming from out of state, advice about how to overcome those objections. So she interviewed very well. Because she was, and it also reaffirmed that her goals. After talking to lots and lots of people, she realized this is what she wanted to do.
Yeah. Like the level of insight that you gain after having 90 conversations would be mind-blowing, like in terms of how she might show up as a candidate for an interview versus somebody else, and the questions that she'd be able to ask of them, the responses she'd be able to give. And so it's spending the time up front to gain all of that insight that's going to make you stand out as a candidate. And everyone doesn't have to do 90 conversations, but doing a significant amount, so you've got a data set and you've got information that you can say, actually, I've spoken to enough people to know that this is the path that I want to take. And I think that's particularly important when you're changing career, because when you have to answer the question, why is it that you're trying to move, has to be based on something. And so if you've got that information to be able to say, I understand the synergies between what I did before and what I would be doing now and what's involved, and here's why I want to do it, it's so much more believable than just kind of it sounds like a good career for me.
Right. And to come full circle to the start of our conversation, we were talking about how hiring works and the importance of referrals and connections and relationships. Well, this person, she created her own referrals and connections and relationships. When she was walking into interview rooms, the odds are at the end of that 6 months, she had met some of those people. Or they knew people in common, or she could get someone she had met who knew someone in the interview committee to send that email or send that text saying you should talk to so-and-so. And in this case, she was someone who came from another place and had to, and was breaking into a new location. But with career changing, it's really parallel. It's the same thing. Maybe you're not moving to a new city or a new state. You're moving into a new field, but you've got to get that knowledge and you've got to make those connections. And the kind of informational interviews that this person did that we were talking about earlier are just the best way to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I like to call them golden nugget conversations, because I feel like that it can literally be a 20-minute conversation and that person gives you one golden nugget that just shifts your perspective or gives you the clarity that you need. So if you're listening and you've been reserved about reaching out and networking, I hope that this is something that you will start doing, because it will yield so much.
Yeah, and I'm often asked by some people, well, I have that 20-minute meeting. How did I know it worked? What does success looks like? And It's three things. And you can do this in 20 minutes or 30. The first thing is you go into that meeting and you introduce yourself, you tell your story, and you share your goal. And you can do that with practice in 3 to 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. The second thing you do is you ask those targeted questions. There's a reason why you wanted to meet this person. She's got some insight into what you want to do. Maybe she made the same career change. Maybe she works in the field you want to be in. But you walk into the room typically with 3 to 5 questions that this person is uniquely qualified to answer. So if you get the answers to those, that's number 2. And the third thing you need to accomplish to have a successful informational interview is to ask for introductions to others. Mm-hmm. And you can often look at someone's LinkedIn and you can say, oh, Mary knows, these 2 people. And you can say, hey, I see, Marie and John, could you make an introduction? Here's why I'd like to meet them. Or can I use your name? So if you, at the end of that 20 or 30-minute conversation, have done those 3 things, that's a successful meeting.
Yeah, so good. I love that structure. It's so focused, but so powerful.
Yeah, again, everybody who's listening has run business meetings. This is a business meeting. You're in charge. That is one agenda, and that's how you know whether or not you're making progress. Because as you start reaching out to people and you have a few dozen of these conversations, you'll start hearing about jobs that aren't advertised. My business, we sell job postings. No one knows how many positions aren't advertised. There are all kinds of estimates out there. But even with the positions that are advertised, again, this goes back to how hiring works and the importance of referrals and connections. Having connections to employers, getting referrals makes all the difference because, again, employers are trying to reduce risk in hiring. So informational interviews are a great way to create those referrals. They're also a great way to uncover jobs that may never be posted. Yeah,
so good. Oh, you shared so many insights. I love this. I love this so much. Mac, I love to ask people who come on the show if they have a phrase, a mantra, a saying that they like or that they live by. Can you think of one that you'd like to share?
I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, and I'm sure he's not the only one who's said this, but don't wait to be picked. So I often meet people who want to work for a certain company or nonprofit, and I'll say, well, have you talked to anybody there? Well, no, but I look at their website every day, and that's great. You should. But if there's an employer where you want to work, or you need to figure out how to start talking to people inside that organization, don't wait for a posting to come up. If you know that there's a job you want to do, and especially at a certain employer, start talking to people who are doing that work. Start talking to people inside that organization, especially the people who have the job, and ask them how they got there. And ask them for their advice about who might be offering similar positions and get to know those people. Because if you wait to be picked, if you wait for the posting to pop up on a career page at a company, you're going to be competing with, 40, 50, 100 other people. And that might still happen. But if you've invested the time to get to know people inside that organization and you've talked to people who do that work, you're going to have a huge advantage over your competitors, even if the position is publicly posted. So don't wait to be picked.
Yeah. Oh, such a good saying. I love it. So good. If people want to listen to your podcast, learn more about all the amazing resources that you have for job searchers on your site, where's the best place for them to go? Would it be the website?
Yes, our website is maxlist.org. And you can find hundreds of articles there about how to look for work, several free online courses, one about interviewing, one about using social media in your job search, and our podcast, Find Your Dream Job. It's a weekly career interview advice show, rather, Janine. And we're celebrating our 8th anniversary in October of 2023. So we're well over 400 episodes. And every week I talk to a different career expert about the nuts and bolts of job search.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, well, I'm going to put the links to all of that in the show notes so people can go and check that out because it's invaluable information and support for job searchers. So thank you so much. And just thank you for the work that you do. It's incredible. All of the podcasting and everything. I really appreciate it as a fellow career coach and expert. Like just having those kind of resources are so great for people. So thanks for the work.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show, Janine.
Yeah, thank you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any future episodes. Also, I would love to know what your biggest takeaway has been from today's episode. Come over and join us in our Career Changemakers community over on LinkedIn so that you can join the conversation there. Head over to lightboxcoaching.com/community and it will take you right to the group. I look forward to seeing you.